on this daf. Okay, we are. Hi, Sheldon. How are you?
Hello. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Okay, so we're with God's help, we're at the end here. We are beginning about 10 lines from the top of Kuf Chaf Amud Sheni. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 11 lines, 11, 12 lines. We learned in our Mishnah, Pesach, the Korban Pesach, Acha Chatzos, after midnight, Mitame Esi Adayim. Well, hold on. Hello. Good evening, Lewis. Hi. Okay, we're beginning. Hi, Lewis.
Hi.
We're beginning about 12 lines from the top. We're at the end over here. Kuf Chaf Amud Sheni. And it's about 12 lines from the top. Hapeches Sach Acha Chatzos. We learned in our Mishnah that the Korban Pesach after Chatzos, Mitamei Esi Yadayim, will make your hands tamei. Now, really, making your hands tamei is a sign of a tumah d'rabbanan. It's not possible that your hands can become tamei and your body does not become tamei. So when Chazal said that your hands become tamei, it means you're like have a sheni tumah, and it's uncomfortable for you to either wash your hands or have to go to a mikvah. Now, the reason why they said the Korban Pesach after Chatzos will make you tamei, because they really wanted you to finish eating the Korban Pesach. They didn't want you to leave anything over, not to be lazy about it. So if you know that you're going to have to go to the mikveh afterwards, you're going to have to go to the mikveh, then
I don't hear a word you say. Goodbye.
Then you're going to have to, then you're going to make sure that you're going to finish it. So the Mishnah says, after Chatzos, it becomes noiser, basically. That's why it makes your hands tamei. Alma, so we see from our Mishnah, mechatzos havele noiser. From midnight, it's now becomes usher to eat the Korban Pesach. It's leftovers. It means you have up until midnight to eat the Korban Pesach, and beyond that, it becomes noiser, expired, basically. Mantana, who is the author of that opinion? Amar Rav Yosef says, Rav Loza ben Azariah. It's the famous Rav Loza ben Azariah. His opinion is that you don't have a whole night to eat the Korban Pesach. You have up until midnight. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, you have to eat the meat of the Korban Pesach that night. So Rav Loza ben Azariah, Rav Loza ben Azariah says, Nema kan, it says over here, balayla hazeh, emphasis on the word hazeh. And it says by Bakas Bachoris Vabarti, I will pass through Beret Mitzrayim balayla hazeh. That and that night, malahalan at Chatzos. Just like over there, it happened up until midnight. Basically, by midnight, the whole Makas Bechoros was over. Afkan, you have until at Chatzos to eat the Korban Pesach. And basically, Reb Lezer ben Azariah has an interesting opinion, which is that the Korban becomes expired right at midnight. But from midnight till the morning, you're not allowed to burn it. You have to wait until the next day to burn it. So it's like it doesn't become nicer until you can't burn it on Yom Tov. You have to wait till Yom Tov right after the first day of Chol Hamoed to burn it. But it becomes expired midnight. Amalai Rabbi Akiva says, but the pasuk says you eat it b'chipazon in a rush. That means ad sha'as chipazon. Rabbi Akiva's of the opinion is, when were you rushed out of Mitzrayim? Early in the morning. So Rabbi Akiva says that by specifying that the Korban Pesach should be eaten chipazon in a rush, it's implying that you're eating the Korban Pesach right up till the point where you were rushed out of Mitzrayim, which is early in the morning. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva's opinion is it doesn't become nicer until the actual morning. Why does it say in the Chumash that you eat it at night? What does it mean? And Yochel, I would have thought, that the Korban Pesach should be eaten like kachim during the day. Then, in other words, I would have thought that the day that you shech the Korban Pesach, you should be allowed to eat your Korban Pesach that afternoon, like Erev Pesach. Talmud loyba b'layla. That's why the Torah says you can only eat it at night. B'laylahu nechel, it only is eaten by night. Nechel bayom, it's not eaten during the day. But Till when could you eat it? That's until chipazon, until you were rushed out of Mitzrayim. So, but now the question is, but there's an extra word hazeh. Rabbi Kiva, hi hazeh, my avidle. See, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah used the hazeh as a gzeira shava to teach me that you could only eat the carbon pesach up until midnight when the makas bechoros happened. But what did Rabbi Akiva do with the hazeh over here? My avidle, what does he do with the word hazeh? And since the Gemara to exclude that you don't eat the carbon pesach like a regular carbon. In other words, you would eat it on Seder night during the daytime of first day Yom Tov and by the night of the second Seder. I would have thought that you're allowed to eat the carbon pesach. It doesn't expire until that first day morning, but that's you have 2 nights to eat it. I would have thought, Hoyle, since Pesach Kodoshim Kalam, Pesach shouldn't be different than any other Kachim Kalam, like any carbon, like a Shlomim, Shlomim Kachim Kalam, and Shlomim is a Kachim Kalam. So Ma Kach Shlomim, just like a Shlomim, right? If this person decides to bring the carbon Shlomim, you eat it for 2 days and 1 night. In other words, the day you shecht it, that night, and the next day you can eat your carbon shlamim, right? So I would think that carbon pesach is very similar. Well, you can't start eating it the day you shecht it, so you'll start eating it by Seder day, night, then the next day, and then the following night you can eat it. You af Pesach, I would have thought Pesach, oikim leilois bimkaim yamim, that you put the Pesach at night and taking the place of days. Just the shlamim, you eat it during the daytime. The carbon Pesach, you eat 2 nights and 1 day. You eat it by 2 nights and 1 day. So the Torah writes hazeh, which means that what? That only 1 night you can eat it. It's not a 2-night affair and not a 2-night and a 1-day affair. Hazeh means only 1 night. So that's what Rabbi Akiva uses the word hazeh. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, how do I know that the carbon pesach is very different and that's not eaten the following night? He will say, because the pasuk says, Lo yisiru menu ad boiker. You don't leave it over to the morning. You're not allowed to nafka. He learned that din from don't leave it over till the first morning that you have. So we see from that the right away, the morning after the first Seder, already it becomes nicer. You can't eat it anymore. So that's a good reason, certainly. So once you can't eat it at that point, you can't eat it the next night either. So that's how Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah doesn't need the hazeh to teach you that din. So therefore, hazeh is extra to teach you the din that you could only eat the carbon pesach till midnight. Rabbi Kiva Amalacha, Rabbi Kiva says, I need it. Iloi kosev rachamona hazeh. If the Torah did not write hazeh, that you could only eat it 1 night, havamina, I would have thought my boiker sheni, that the Torah says don't leave it over, not the first morning after the Seder, but the second morning after the Seder, which means that you would eat the carbon pesach the first night, again the next day, and the following night. And the Torah is telling you don't leave it over till that morning, the next morning after that. And you would have basically 2 nights and 1 day to complete your carbon pesach. That's why the Torah told you hazeh to teach you only have 1 night to eat the carbon pesach, not 2 nights. And Rabbi Elazar will tell you, I don't need hazeh for that. Kol heicha the kosev boiker rishon hu. Wherever the Torah wrote the word boiker, it meant the first morning. So basically, Rabbi Elazar knows that carbon pesach is eaten just for 1 night, or you only have a part of 1 night to eat the carbon pesach. He knows that from lo yisiru mimenu ad boiker, which means the first morning you're not allowed to have it left over by that time. So therefore, what does he do with hazeh? Hazeh is extra. Hazeh is gzeira shova. That not only are you not allowed to leave it in the morning, but by midnight you have to stop eating. Hazeh means up until midnight you can eat the carbon pesach. It doesn't become actual noisar until the morning. That's Rabbi Elazar's opinion. Rabbi Akiva's opinion is you have the entire night to eat the carbon pesach, And the word hazeh teaches me that you can't eat it on the next night. Now comes the famous Gemara, where the Gemara asks, okay, Bizman hazeh, we have no Karban Pesach, and we are eating the matzah as a remembrance to the matzah that was eaten with the Karban Pesach. That is the opinion of the Rashbam. So Amar Rava said, Ochol matzah bizman hazeh, if you eat matzah nowadays, acha chatzos, after midnight, right? So Reb Lezer ben Azariah, according to Reb Lezer ben Azariah, lo yotze deichai v'asai, you didn't fulfill your obligation of eating what we will call the afikomen if you eat it after midnight. That's why there's such a push to make sure that you eat the afikomen perhaps, or to eat it before midnight, because according to Reb Lezer ben Azariah, since this matzah is a zeicher to the matzah that was eaten with the Karban Pesach, and the Karban Pesach, according to Reb Lezer ben Azariah, was only eaten until midnight, so our matzah should only be eaten up until midnight. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? That Kavan the Ishkash the Pesach, since the matzah is compared to Pesach, and actually the Torah aligns them together. It says al matzos umroirim yachluhu. You have to eat them with the Pesach. You eat the matzah with it. So Pesach Dam, it should be no different than the Karban Pesach that is eaten up until midnight. So the Gemara says, interesting teretz. Mahu the same. I would have thought ho'apke krame kesha. The Torah told you that matzah is not so aligned with Pesach, because if we had a hekesh before that said that the Torah says shesis yomim you should eat matzah, and then the Torah says on the seventh day you don't have to eat matzah, and we darshan that just like on the seventh day you don't have to eat matzah, all 6 days there is no mitzvah to eat matzah. Even the first day there is no mitzvah to eat matzah. So the Torah already said that Karban Pesach matzah already for a moment of time. The Torah said that matzah is voluntary. You want to eat matzah, you could eat matzah. That's what, for a moment, the Torah said that. Then, so I might think, since the Torah for a moment separated matzah and did not align it with Pesach, I might think that matzah is very different. Matzah can be eaten throughout the entire night, although the Pesach could be eaten up until midnight. Kumash Malon, so it comes to teach you, when the Torah reinstated an obligation to eat matzah. When did the Torah reinstate the obligation to eat matzah? By saying, Erev, that first night, toichlu matzah, you eat matzah. Oh, so now the obligation is back on. So that's the chiddush, that lamilsa kamaisa hadre. It goes back to its earlier comparison, the earlier halachas. And just like in the beginning, matzah was aligned with Pesach to have the same dinim as Karban Pesach. So also, even though for a moment the Torah said, it's not it's voluntary, but then the Torah said it's obligated on the first night. The Torah realigned it to matzah, to Pesach. That just like Karban Pesach could be eaten by chatzos, so also the matzah has to be eaten by chatzos. I'll tell you something very interesting, that if you're really in a pickle and you're not going to be able to finish your meal by chatzos, so according to the problem is, what you should do is, there's a cheshbon from the Avnei Nezer who said that 5 minutes before midnight you should eat a kazayas matzah. Eat a kazayas matzah and say to yourself like this: if the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, this should be my afikomen, right? And then for the next 5 minutes up until midnight, don't eat anything. By midnight already, there's no mitzvah of matzah anymore, and therefore at that point, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, you're allowed to eat, right? You're allowed to eat, because when do we say ein maftirin acha pesach afikomen? You're not allowed to eat after the afikomen. Only when you ate the afikomen and it's still during the zman where you could eat the afikomen. But since Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds that after midnight there's no mitzvah to eat afikomen, in fact it's not the zman anymore, so just eat a matzah before midnight and say to yourself, if it's the afikomen time according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, let this be my afikomen, and then wait 5 minutes and you don't eat anything. And then after midnight, continued eating, because according to Rabbi Akiva, you didn't do the afikomen yet. You could wait till 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning and do your afikomen, because according to Rabbi Akiva, you have a whole night to do the afikomen. And when you eat the afikomen, you're not going to eat after that afikomen, that matzah, until the next morning. So basically, there is ways out of it if you're in a bind and you see that your meal is going a little bit longer and you still not up to the matzah afikomen. Eat a little bit of matzah and say, if the halacha is like Rab Lezer, this is my afikomen. And then after chatzos, you continue eating and say, if perhaps the halacha is not like Rab Lezer ben Azariah, perhaps the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, that I could eat my afikomen all night. Mishnah, the Bryce
What
is the
is chatzos?
What?
What actually is chatzos this year?
That's a good question. I'll tell you in a split. I mean, that's a good. I think it's one. My impression is easy zmanim. I have the app right here in front of me, and funny they don't. Oh, chatzos midday. I don't know. First of all, I mean, you're not going to get started with your seder before 8:30, 8:45. I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows. I would wonder.
Okay.
Pigel v'anosa metames yadayim. The Mishnah said that pigel and nosar make your hands tame. Rav Huna Rav Chizda is a machlekes. Rav Huna Rav Chizda. Chad Amar mishum chashedei hakuhuna. Basically, this is the reason why they said pigel. If the kohen thinks a bad thought, he thinks the wrong carbon, it makes his hands tame. Basically, the kohen who is doing the service of your carbon will have to go to the mikvah. Now, why did they say by pigel? If a kohen postles your carbon with a bad thought, it makes him tame, because we are choshid the kohen. In other words, we accuse the kohen that maybe he dislikes the guy that he's bringing the carbon to. So what he's going to do is basically, even though he's a religious man, he's going to on purpose cause the carbon to be puzzled by thinking a bad thought. Let's say when he's spraying the blood. And then he'll go back to the owner and say, look, I apologize. I got confused. I thought you were bringing the oila, and I had in mind the shlomim. So, and we think that the kohen did it on purpose. Well, knowing that if he does do this on purpose, knowing that he'll have to go to the mikveh and be matar himself, this is a deterrent that he will not do that. So even though a kohen is like a soine, it has enemies, and but to be metame himself, he's not going to want to do that. So therefore, this will prevent pigel problems, like pigel on purpose problems. That's the reason why they said pigel is makes the kohen tame. Now, he's going on. Once explained why noiser is metameyu, because noiser is because of the lazy kohen. The kohen's going to say, I have still time to eat it. Still time to eat it. And he only has, that night to eat it, and that day to eat it. Let's say it's a carbon chatas. So he's going to push it off, and then it's going to become noiser. And he may eat it after noiser. So we tell the kohen, look, if you have meat that's left over from a carbon that you were supposed to eat, it's going to make you tameh. You're going to have to go to the mikveh. He's not going to want to do that. So therefore, it'll promote the eating of carbonos on time. Next. Chadamar Kazayas. One said, when we said that pigel or noisa make your hand tame, how big does the piece have to be? One said it has to be as big as an olive. The Chad Omar, one said kabetza, and it has to be the size of an egg. That's when it's metami yadayim. Kuf chaf aleph Omar aleph. Now, we just explained this outside. Chad Omar a pigel, Chad Omar noisa. One was talking about pigel, and one was talking about noisa. Mandatoni a pigel, the one that was talking about pigel, he was the one that gave the reason, Mishum chashedei kahuna, because we are accusing the kohen that he's going to on purpose pigel up your carbon because he dislikes the owner for whatever reason. So therefore, we tell the kohen, if you do that, you're going to become tummy, you're going to have to go to the mikveh. As a deterrent, we said that pigel makes you tummy. Mandatoni a noiser, one that said that expired carbonos make you tamei mishum atzeli akuna, that the kohanim should not be lazy when it comes to eating. They should make sure to eat it up as much as they can, and not to leave it over. So therefore, we tell them it's metami. Chadoma kazayis v'chadoma kabeya. One said what makes you tummy is a zayis, and one said it has to be the size of an egg. Manda makazayis isure. It's like the isser of eating pigel. It's like the isser of eating nosar. The isser of eating is olive. That's the isser of eating pigel and nosar. That's why to metame your yadayim, to make your hands tummy, all it has to be is the size of an olive. That one that said it's like an egg is kitum asai. It's like regular tumis oichlim. Tumis oichlim doesn't metame you unless it's the size of an egg. And therefore, when did they say that pigel and noiser could metame a person midrabanan? Only if it's the size of an egg. New Mishnah and the last Mishnah. The halacha is when you eat your carbon pesach, you say Asher Kedushanim B'Mitzoysev Itzivanu Le'echol HaPesach. And when you eat the carbon chagiga that was brought with the carbon pesach, remember, on Erev Pesach you brought two carbonas. One was a carbon chagiga, that was like your main course, and the carbon pesach was like the dessert course. So when you brought your carbon chagiga, you make a bracha like any brichas mitzvahs. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvahs tzivanu le'echol hazevach, to eat the carbon. So one is called le'echol haPesach and one is called le'echol hazevach. So now we have a machlekes in our Mishnah. Beirach birchas haPesach, a guy who was shechting the carbon to eat the carbon Pesach, he made a bracha to eat the carbon Pesach. So poter eshel zebach, then he does not have to make the bracha on the carbon chagiga anymore, because the carbon Pesach is like, let's say, a shahako, so it potters already the bracha on the carbon chagiga. Beirach eshel zebach, but you make a bracha on the carbon chagiga, loy poter eshel zebach. You didn't exempt yourself from making a bracha on the carbon Pesach, and you would have to make another bracha on when you eat the carbon Pesach. So basically, you start the night, you say Asher Kiddusham Mitzvayis Vitzivanu Lechol Hazevach, then you eat your main course, which was the carbon Chagiga, and then for dessert, they brought you you ate the carbon Pesach and you made a bracha Asher Kiddusham Mitzvayis Vitzivanu Lechol HaPesach. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. But if you did the reverse order, the carbon Pesach would exempt you from making a bracha on the carbon Chagiga. Rabbi Akiva Oimer, Loizu Paterazu, Loizu Paterazu. They have nothing to do with each other. The bracha on the carbon Pesach will not exempt you from the bracha on Chagiga, and the bracha on Chagiga would not exempt you from making a bracha on the Pesach. You'd have to make separate brachas for each. Now, the Gemara interestingly compares that there's another nafkamina lahalacha between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. It seems that Rabbi Shmuel holds that Pesach is more all-inclusive bracha and would include the Chagiga. So according to that, Rabbi Shmuel's opinion, you could extend it a little bit, because when you bring a carbon Chagiga, you basically had, when the kohen collected the blood after the slaughtering, he would go to the mizbeach and take with the blood that's in the keli, the blood that's in the vessel, and just give it a splash on the wall he would throw it basically, the blood onto the wall of the mizbeach. Carbon Pesach was very different. When the kohen accepted the blood, he went to the mizbeach and he went to like the foundation of the mizbeach, the yesod, and just poured it over that a little bit onto the foundation. So there are different ways, there are different methods to pour the blood for the carbon. For carbon chagiga, you went zrika, throwing it. You threw it from the keli, and from the carbon pesach, you had to walk up very close to the mizbeach and pour it by the foundation. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, zrika b'chlal shvicha. If by accident you did a shvicha for your chagiga, you were yotze. If someone had the blood of a chagiga and went up and poured it on the mizbeach, that's kosher, because the Pesach is a more all-inclusive type of carbon, would include the carbon chagiga, and therefore, if you did the action of putting the blood on mizbeach of the chagiga the way it's done by a carbon Pesach, b'di'evid you yotze that carbon chagiga. But pouring is not considered like throwing, and therefore, if someone went with the carbon Pesach and the kohen went with the carbon pesach blood and just threw it onto the mizbeach, that wouldn't work because shvicha, pouring, is not included into zrika. So basically the same idea. Just like Rabbi Shmuel says that the carbon pesach includes in its bracha the carbon chagiga, also the method of sprinkling, the method of getting the blood on the mizbeach, if you use the method of carbon pesach, it would work for the carbon chagiga. But the opposite wouldn't work. Just like the bracha of the chagiga does not work for the carbon pesach, so also the method of splashing the blood of a carbon chagiga, and you did that for a carbon pesach, it wouldn't work. You wouldn't be yaitz in the carbon pesach. That's according to Rabbi Yishmael. But Rabbi Akiva, they have nothing to do with each other. Pouring is not throwing, and throwing is not pouring. In other words, if you mess up on the way you get the blood onto the mizbeach, it doesn't work. Therefore, for carbon pesach, we have to make sure, according to Rabbi Akiva, the only way it becomes a kosher carbon pesach is if you actually walk up to the mizbeach and pour it onto the foundation of the mizbeach. But according to a chagiga, the only way you yotze a chagiga is if you splash it. You stay at a distance from the mizbeach and you splash it at the corners. But you can't mix the two because they're not. One carbon has nothing to do with another carbon. That is the end. And then we go to Amud Sheni, which is the smallest Amud Sheni we ever learned. And the Gemara ends the whole Masechta like this: Rabbi Simlai ikle lepidyon haben. Rabbi Simlai was by a pidyon haben. This story is brought in because we're talking about brachas. And one bracha, some things need two brachas. Like carbon pesach needs one bracha, and carbon chagiga needs another bracha. And so, if you're zoicha to do a pidyon haben for yourself or for your grandkids, there are questions about the two brachas. So this is the story. Rabbi Simlai ikla pidyon haben. Rabbi Simlai was a guest at a pidyon haben. And they asked from him, Pshita, it's very simple. The bracha al pidyon haben, asheki l'shalom mitzayis tzivona al pidyon haben. Who makes that bracha? Who makes that bracha? So the Gemara says, Avi haben mavar. The father of the son makes that bracha because he has the commandment of doing pidyon haben and giving the money out of his pocket to redeem his firstborn and giving it to the Kohen. But the question is, Baruch shechiyanu v'kiyimanu v'giyanu nazeh. That shechiyanu for that mitzvah, who makes that bracha? Kohen mevarech. Does the Kohen make a bracha? Oy avi haben mevarech. Does the father of the son make the blessing? Who makes the blessing? So the Gemara says, what are the two sides? Kohen mevarech. Does the Kohen make the blessing? The kamati hanoli yedei. He gets the money. The father is giving him 5 silver coins. So therefore, he's getting such a nice gift, the Kohen. He should make the shechiyanu. Oy, but maybe, perhaps, Abi haben mevarech. The father of the son should make the blessing, the ka'ovid mitzvah, that he did a mitzvah. So Rabbi Simlai was a guest by this pidyon haben, and he's the rabbi and the great Talmud Chacham. And they asked him, who should make the shechiyanu, the father or the Kohen? So the Gemara says, Lo yahave b'yedei. He did not have it. He did not know clearly who should make the bracha. Asa sha'il bei midrasha. And he went into the Beis Medrash and asked the question. We see the intellectual honesty over here. The rabbi himself didn't know what the halacha is. And so he didn't give a fake answer and say to save himself. He wanted to get the precise answer. So he held up the pidyon haben and went to the Beis Medrash to discuss the issue with his contemporaries. Amar lei, so they told Rabbi Simlai, the halacha is Avi haben mevarech shtayim. The father of the son makes both brachas, the pidyon haben bracha and the shechiyanu bracha. The hilkasen, that is the halacha. Avi haben mevarech shtayim. The father of the son makes 2 blessings. I was just thinking out loud that very interesting that the Gemara ends off the whole Pesachim with this story about concluding that the father of the son should make this bracha. And I thought to myself that lots of times that after a whole Pesach Seder, and you're very on a high level, and you're ready to end the night, you think to yourself, but wait a second, the problems that I have, a person who has an issue that they need to resolve, and sometimes it doesn't get resolved. It just seems that a problem that you have never goes away. And a person says, what did I gain from this whole Seder? At the end of the day, I didn't get any benefit from it because the problem that I have still exists. But we tell the person that what gives you the biggest chiyus in life is not, like we said, that like the coin, because he gets benefit from it. The biggest chiyus that you walk away after the whole Seder, and what gives you the shehachiyanu of life is that you are given the opportunity to ovid mitzvah, to do a mitzvah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be an Eved Hashem, to actually have a self-worth and a connection with the Eibishter that you're doing his commandments. And that's the whole message of the Seder. That first of all, that whatever is going on in a person's life, there is a Seder for it, even though it seems like it's just status quo. There is an order for it. And the fact is that what's going to give you the chiyus of your existence is the fact that you're an Eved Hashem and that you're given the opportunity to do mitzvahs. And that is the message of the Seder before you go to sleep.
Yeshikor.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov, everybody.
Mazel tov. Mazel
Big
tov.
accomplishment.
Yeah.
It's a big honor, and I have said this again, but I'll say it again. But that you give me the opportunity to look over the Gemara and prepare, and we do it together as a group, and we discover new things together.
You do the whole cycle together.
Yeah. Amen. Amen.
Mhm.
I don't know. Is anybody here tomorrow to start Shekalim? If not, we can pick it up after.
I'm here tomorrow.
What? You're not here, right?
I'm here tomorrow night. I am
Around.
right tomorrow.
All right, so we'll
Yeah.
start Shekalim, and then I guess
I'll be here.
then we'll take a break. I
I'll be
guess
here.
Wednesday we'll take a break till after
Okay.
till
Okay.
Pesach. I guess
Okay.
people are
All right.
going away, so we'll just make
I-
the hemshech doing Shekalim. It's Yushalmi, and then it's going to be hard to do it over Chalamoid. Everybody's busy, and I still have younger kids that I have to. I'm still a counselor. Put it that way. So,
Yeah.
NCSY is opening up great adventures if you're interested in that. That's what I'm looking around. All right.
Okay.
Good. I think
Enjoy.
I said 12:59.
Yeah.
Oh,
12:59 is Chatzos.
It's 5:10.
Okay.
12:59. It's a minute earlier, I think, than New York City.
Right. You know,
I
they one time had a matzah bakery in Far Rockaway.
I remember that.
The Kolil people over here, there's an Indian to bake matzahs on Erev Pesach. And it was like this year where Shabbos was Erev Pesach. So I remember some of these Kolil guys, after davening Marav Matzah Shabbos, they went to the matzah bakery, baked matzahs, and then started their Seder at 11 o'clock. And that's how these shilas come up. I guess you have to know your wife before you do such a thing. Very well. I don't know. I would probably be in the garbage pail if I did that. But they would come back at 11 o'clock, with fresh matzahs that they just baked, start their Seder at 11. But again, that cheshbon of you don't necessarily have to finish the Afikomen. Only
Yeah.
after a blessed
All right.
Good to know, everybody.
I will do the Siyum tomorrow, and I will say Kaddish. Everybody in
Yes.
mind, okay?
Everybody have in mind.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeshikor. Yeshikor.
Okay,
All right,
mazel tov,
sir.
everybody.
Mazel tov. Mazel tov.
Hey, Mazel Tov, everyone.
Mazel tov.
Okay.
See you tomorrow.